All right, joining us with more information from Washington is Ed Henry. Listen, I think you nailed it before. Trump encouraging Comey to continue with the investigation, even if it's people close to me. We need to know. That is huge news tonight.
I've got two things for you on top of that, Sean. You're right. You're referring to a March 30th, 2017 memo where James Comey himself summarizes a phone call with the president. I believe it was 11 minutes long. So this is not just quick hellos. This is a detailed call where James Comey writes later that the president told him to investigate the Russian collusion allegations. If you find wrongdoing, fine. But just I want it out there that I'm not personally under investigation. So here's a new nugget. April 2017, there's a new phone call, and you can see the statement from those Republican leaders that was just on the screen, but saying that this shows that the president was saying investigate it. But then there's another call, and in April 2017, Comey writes a new memo where the president says, are you going to put it out there that I'm not personally under investigation? And Comey goes on to say, bottom line, you should have, Mr. President, the White House counsel's office call the acting attorney general, Dana Biante at the time, because Jeff Sessions had recused himself, and see whether they'll do that. Obviously, they never did that. They never put out that statement. Here's my point. James Comey never in this memo says, I was outraged that the president asked me to do that. This was inappropriate. No. James Comey just said, look, I don't think the FBI should do that, but if you can get the White House counsel's office to call the Justice Department and say you're not personally under investigation, I don't have a problem with that. So here's the very bottom line, Sean. One of our viewers just tweeted me as they're looking at our coverage saying, remember that we were all told that these Comey memos, once they leaked, led Rod Rosenstein, the Deputy Attorney General, to appoint Special Counsel Robert Mueller because he just had to. There was so much evidence here. Read through these memos. People can find them online. What led Rod Rosenstein to say there needs to be a special counsel? Instead, you have the President of the United States saying, investigate this.
You know, look, there's a part of me tonight, for a lot of reasons, what happened last night, the criminal referrals, the criminal referral today, we've learned a lot and we know where we are. There's a sad part of this story, that this country has been put through all of this, and that was in the memo from the very get-go. We got two main things here. A, the president never obstructed. B, there's no Russia collusion when you look at what happened today as it relates to Andrew McCabe, et cetera.
Sure. So
this is a huge night. This is a night where
what is in here, and these officials have seen this for months, Sean, over a year.
Yes,
and now we're getting transparency.
We're getting transparent, which means the whole thing, the country has been through this for absolutely no reason. It is unbelievable, and you've done a great job. I know by the way, you work really well under pressure.
It's nice to hear from you, Sean.
All right. Thank you so much, Ed Henry. All right, that's all the time we have left this evening. I will break all this down tomorrow. I promise. Be with us, but let not your heart be troubled. We'll always be fair and balanced. Laura Ingraham has had a full hour to study this. I can't wait to hear your comments.
Sean, great show tonight. And that's it. I'm telling you, this is the biggest. Again, we keep saying news is not going to break so late in the evening, but every night we're wrong. We have to blow up our show, change it all around. And that's why we love live TV. I'm Laura Ingraham, and this is the Ingraham Angle. We have a Fox News alert. Fox News has obtained those controversial Jim Comey memos about the meetings with President Trump. We have a member of the House Intel Committee reviewing the redacted and unredacted versions, and he joins us in moments to tell us what's inside. Now, the memos describe former FBI Director Comey's private interactions with President Trump. And the big question is whether Comey leaked any classified information to the press. Here's what he said a short time ago after the memos were made public.
I'm sure the special counsel is considering my recollection of those events, which are reflected in these memos. But it's my recollection that is the evidence that will be used if there was ever a proceeding. These would be to show that I wrote it down at the time, sort of to bolster the credibility of my recollection.
Now, to sort this out and tell us what's inside, let's bring in Republican Congressman Chris Stewart, a member of the House Intel Committee. Congressman.
Good evening.
Give us the take.
Well, you know what it shows me, and we haven't had a chance to go through all of it, and most people haven't, but it shows me that the Director Comey was dishonest with the President from the very beginning.
How so?
And continues to be. Well, for example, he should have gone in and said, Mr. President, we have this piece of political garbage. It was funded by the DNC. It was funded by Hillary Clinton. Pay no attention to it, and if anyone brings it up, we'll refute it. We'll say it's not credible. He said later on it was salacious, unverified. He should have said that in stronger words. Instead, what he said to the President is, the Russians are reporting, as if this was a credible Russian intelligence operation, when he knew that it wasn't. He knew that this wasn't some formal document the Russian intelligence had created and put together. It was put together by Hillary Clinton and the DNC, who used a foreign agent, by the way, who used second and third-hand information from unidentified Russians that we don't even know who they were. He should have been honest with the President. And by the way, he's being dishonest with the President continuing. He says that he thinks it's possible that the President is under some type of shadow, that the Russians have some information.
Well, he kind of walked that back a little bit
Well,
today.
he should have walked it back, because it's possible.
That was outrageous.
Well,
I mean, it's outrageous for a former FBI
director. It's possible he's got information on you and on me and Director Comey, but that's the position he's taken on this. He's trying to cast as deep a shadow as he possibly could over this problem.
Well, memos to the file are invariably self-serving documents. I remember when I was a white-collar criminal defense attorney, you always look at those and like, well, let's go over what really, okay, you're not going to write a memo to the file that makes you look like a fool or makes you look like a liar or makes you look like you're misrepresenting the facts. You're going to write a memo to the file that memorializes events in a way that usually will make you look the best, in the best light. There was an interesting part of this, one of these memos. It's not very long. You have the unredacted, redacted version. This is what he says in one of the memos. He said, I had dinner with President Trump in the green room at the White House last night at 6:30 p.m. I explained that he could always count on me to tell the truth. I said, I don't do sneaky things. I don't leak. I don't do weasel moves. Yeah. What was that release in the memo to the Columbia professor to release it to the media? What was that, leaking, or was that just, tiddlywinks?
Well, and it's not the way a FBI director should respond or should act, and to be dishonest about it. And I got to tell you, Laura, too, that the testimony that the director has provided before the committee in closed sessions does not comport at all with some of the things that he's saying publicly right now. And
now, you can't discuss this because it's a closed session,
that's right.
Or is it already out there?
No, this hasn't been, but we hope it will be, and it should be. And by the way, this is another good example of information that should have been released the first time we asked. Why in the world does the Department of Justice feel like it's their responsibility to protect this person rather than their responsibility would be to be open and honest with the American people?
Now, there's another part of this memo where President Trump, rightly, as he did in the campaign, calls into question Andrew McCabe. And at that point, he says, about this point, he asked me again about your guy McCabe, and that does sound like Trump, and whether he was going to be okay. I again affirmed Andy's ability and professionalism and said the president would come to see him and benefit from both. At that point, he already knew that Andrew McCabe probably had some problems, yet he was telling the president that McCabe was fine.
Yeah, and which brings me to another question, and that is, how is it that the director of the FBI had surrounded himself with what we know now are political hacks? Andrew McCabe, Mr. Pete Stark, Lisa Page, others. Look, the FBI isn't full of progressives. It's not full of liberal activists. And yet, there around the director, it sure seemed like he had selected and advanced and promoted people that certainly had a different view than many Americans.
Are you going to bring Comey back up?
We sure hope so. And
how are you going to make that happen?
Well, he's going to be. We're going to request that he come and speak before the committee, and I expect.
What if he gives you the Heisman?
Well, I was just going to say, I expect he's going to decline. I can't imagine he's going to be.
Maybe you should just hang out in one of the green rooms upstairs, because he's pretty much at MSNBC. I think he has a little binky and a little sleeping bag up there. He's staying up there a lot. So you should just go up there and interview him.
He's been pretty effective at selling his book. There's no doubt about it. But this is not about his book. This is about learning the truth and having him be accountable for some of the things that he said. Again, I don't expect he's going to be banging on our door and volunteering to come. But if he doesn't, then we'll.
But why won't he? He's a very smart guy. University of Chicago Law School, incredible career in the government. I mean, he's a smart guy. If he can't withstand questioning from you, Congressman, and some of these other guys, he goes on with all these tough guy journalists. I mean, he can't withstand your questions. Hey, stay there, stay right there, because we have a lot more. We're also joined now by former FBI Special Agent Bobby Chacon and former Whitewater Deputy Independent Counsel Saul Weisenberg, and here in the studio with me in D.C., Democratic strategist and Washington attorney Scott Bolden. Scott, I want to go to you. You have experience both on the defense and the prosecution side. Memos to the file. I mean, if you're not a practicing attorney, people think, oh, that's kind of nice. You read it. It's like a Dear Diary, memo to the file. But talk about in your own practice when you looked at memos to the file. I mean, honestly, let's take politics out of it for a moment.
I've been lying up to this point, right?
Yeah, politics out of it for the moment. People who write memos to the file, go.
It's fundamental to litigation, whether you're in the government or otherwise,
Yeah.
white collar or government. It's to me, though, my memos to the file and associates memos to the file are factual. They're facts that you want to make memorable. And I don't know whether they're self-serving, but I will tell you this. We highlight points that are takeaways from those meetings. The FBI, these were pretty standard notes, if you will. Now, you can read into whatever you want to read into them, but in the end, it's all about the facts. And if you want to put a nefarious overlay to it, then that's not going to be very helpful, maybe politically, but as a practical matter, it's not very helpful.
Well, nefarious only, I think, to the extent that he decided, rather than just answering the committee's questions, he would get his point of view out by going through a Columbia professor friend who would then siphon the information out to journalists. That calls into question his motives.
No, it doesn't. He did that in response to Donald Trump's attack on him.
Right. What was he worried about? What was he worried about there,
I don't think he was worried about it.
He was worried
about his reputation.
Thank you.
He was actually worried about his standing and worried about Donald Trump's lies about him.
Is that what the FBI...
What about that, though?
Is that what the FBI director is supposed to be doing? The regulations applicable to this case and the law... Section 641, he should have fired him day one. Section 641 of the code demonstrates clearly you cannot traffic documents, you cannot reveal documents, you cannot sell documents or trade them. He was trading these documents off for his own reputation, was he not?
He was trying to protect his reputation
government computers.
and the United States of America, and sure, he leaked those. Those were his personal notes. Yeah. He didn't break the law in doing it, otherwise he'd be prosecuted, much like
by this FBI?
On Mr. McCabe.
All right, let's go to Saul. Saul, the underlying crime here, now that we see these memos, we see what he wrote in the sedan on the way off from the White House and so forth. Where's the underlying crime?
So,
who's underlying
agree
crime?
With me.
The president, the president,
or Comey's? Yeah, both. Good question, Saul. Take it away.
Well, no, there's no underlying crime for the president reflected in these notes at all. Certainly nothing approaching obstruction of justice. As is so often the case with President Trump, there's not an understanding of norms that have evolved and how you deal with the FBI and how you interact with somebody like the FBI director, but there's nothing close to an obstruction of justice. I share the concern of the congressman. I don't think I would put it in the stark terms he did. If Director Comey knew at the time of this initial meeting where he was alone with the president and briefed him on the salacious Russia allegations, if he knew by that point in time, which I believe he did, who paid for these, that it was the DNC and Mrs. Clinton's campaign, I think it is extremely disappointing that he didn't reveal that to the president. I think he definitely should have done so.
Well, that's a material fact. That's a material fact that goes to the motivations, perhaps even the credibility of the underlying allegations in the dossier. Let's go to Bobby. Bobby, on Jake Tapper's show, we had Comey, he was referencing whether he thought the information, I guess, that he transmitted to his pal was classified or not. Let's watch.
Senator Grassley, the chairman of the Judiciary Committee, says that there are 7 memos. He says 4 of them are classified. Is that right?
I don't know, because I don't have the memos. I don't know exactly how many there are. I know when I created some of them, they were classified, but I don't know how many of that group.
Okay, Bobby, I got to have you take this away. He wrote the memos.
I can't understand.
He wrote the memos.
And how many times this? How many times his answer is, I don't know.
How could he not have them? He had copies. He provided copies to his friend at Columbia. He probably has those memos in his briefcase when he travels around. How could he not have these memos? How many times can we accept the answer that I don't know or I don't remember when he's cornered on one of these questions? It's unfathomable that he doesn't know what's in those memos, that 4 of them were classified. He's got copies of them. He probably has copies of them right there with him.
I say ignorance of the law.
One thing, Laura, one thing that strikes me is that, you know, the FBI, for the FBI director on January 6th, 2 full weeks before the inauguration, he's going immediately and creating these memos, which he already told us that he never had to do under President Obama. And it really sets up this, his mindset was that President Trump was an adversary right from the beginning. Before they even had a relationship, he's treating the President of the United States as his adversary. And it's clear from his creating these memos.
And Bobby, he said the first meeting when he went into Trump Tower, he felt a lot of trepidation going into that meeting. He was afraid. Well, why is he afraid?
Was he? Did he queasy? Did he get queasy? Was he mildly nauseous?
Nauseated, queasy. I think it's nauseated, not nauseous. Otherwise, he would be creating nausea in others. But I'm a grammatical nut. Let's ask you one question. I'm going to go to Scott. What would happen to a regular rank-and-file FBI agent if he sort of, in answer to a committee, a congressman said, well, I wrote them. I don't know if they're classified. Some of them are classified. I don't know. What would happen to that agent?
His career would effectively be over if he wasn't booted out of the FBI. His career as an investigator would be over because, you know, when you show a lack of credibility, you can't be a witness anymore. And our bread and butter in the FBI is to be a witness. I've seen agents suspended for significant amounts of time without pay. Not for leaking, but for taking information from, say, our FBI agents on the ground in Iraq and trying to transmit it to our law enforcement counterparts here because maybe it's a new way of creating an IED that they're finding over there, and then we want to transmit that to our bomb tech partners on the LAPD or LA Sheriff. And when that information is passed without being declassified, they want to fire you or they want to criminally charge you.
Even though the intent was not there to compromise security, Scott.
Well, here's the deal. Look at the first note. You have it right there. The first note says that Mr. Comey writes himself. He doesn't know how to classify these. These are his notes. He says, I'll tell you what, the default is secret. Right there. It's right there. Now, what is so wrong with that?
Oh,
and by the way,
he
said that in the very beginning.
He didn't say that to Jake Tapper. He just said he didn't know what was classified.
We're years later. I'm talking
Chicago
about
Law School. He doesn't remember what's classified or not?
He didn't know how to classify them when he sent them to McCabe and others. What is so wrong with that?
But it doesn't matter if it's classified or not. You cannot send government material to a third party under FBI regulations.
Wasn't government material at that.
Wait a second, Scott. He's creating a memo to the FBI file on his meeting. Not later, he went into the sedan after he went into the White House. He said at one point it was 5 minutes. It was 5 minutes.
Okay.
On a government computer. I will argue that case in court against you every day of the week
and
that's a government document.
Against you
so you think was it on perfume stationery?
For him to release those. It was done in response to the bad conduct of Donald Trump, and he wanted.
No, it was done on government time. It was done on government time. On government property.
That's not the standard. That's not the standard.
Saul.
Yeah.
I mean, what's your response to that? I mean, if you're in the independent counsel's office and you were deputy independent counsel, you're writing a memo to the file on a government computer after meeting with a government official, you send that over to a buddy at a law school and say, well, do what you want with it, get it to a journalist. Is that government property or not?
Well, first of all, two things. They're clearly not his personal notes. They're on, as you say, they're on a government computer. He's writing them to people who are professionals with him in the FBI. And whether it is classified or unclassified, it's government property, and he doesn't have the right to send them out anywhere without getting permission from the proper authority. And by the way, Deputy AG Rosenstein, when he was in front of Congress 2 or 3 months ago, made that point. He was specifically asked that question, and he came up with the same answer that you did and that I do. They just simply aren't his personal notes. It's just
Congressman Stewart, let's move off of that for a second. Congressman Stewart, in the last memo, the president's clear that if he's not a target, He wants people to know that. He wants to be able to be the president of the United States without the anvil of the investigation on his back. What is wrong with that? What is wrong with him saying, hey, if I'm not a target, can you get that out? Like, he's not a political, expert at that point. He just got into office 5 minutes ago.
That's right.
So he's saying that. No, they're making that to be such a big deal. Oh, he's trying to manipulate the investigation. No, he's not. Comey already was basically indicating he wasn't a target.
That's exactly right. Plus, I think he indicates these memos that if there's something that's taken place, he wants to know. And I got to go back to this other thing, because two of the points I think are really important. First, don't leak, especially if you don't know if they're classified. Like he admits he doesn't know.
That's a great point. I didn't think of that.
The second point is, like, look, I'm a former Air Force pilot. I dealt with classified information all the time. All we're asking is that Director Comey and Hillary Clinton be treated just like I would have been treated if I had been responsible for either leaking or disseminating information that was classified. And the last thing, and that is, Director Comey did not reveal to the President that this was paid for by the DNC, by Hillary Clinton, just like they did not reveal to the FISA court that it was paid for by Hillary Clinton and the DNC. That is a meaningful fact that should have been revealed.
Laura, these are disputed facts, though. The fact that the FBI director did not disclose something in his conversations with the president, remember, the president and his campaign since October of 2016 were under investigation, at least in connection to the number of contacts between those campaign members and Russian operatives. Brennan's testimony told you that before Congress under oath.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And so I don't think you know, or he knew, whether the president at that juncture was a target subject or just a witness.
Well,
that's fair analysis.
Right. I understand what
He
you're
told
saying.
him he wasn't.
Yeah,
He told him
he wasn't a target in the memos. I mean, you can read
It's
the
right
memos.
in the
He's not a
memo,
target.
Scott.
But you're talking about the first meeting. At that juncture,
in January.
and it doesn't matter. And by the way, these issues of target and subject and witness,
but I know,
doing an investigation, those
right.
labels can go a lot of different places and then back.
Well,
those are changing
labels. One thing
labels.
I think, just as people, and again, it's hard to take politics out of this because we're all living in Washington and this is very heated. If we were under a cloud of suspicion and the information that was being used to perhaps taint us or tar us was developed by a mortal enemy, political or otherwise, or business, I think all of us as human beings would just want to know that. I mean, would want to, like, okay, wait a second. Now it kind of makes sense why these inflammatory accusations are in there. As people, we would all want to know that. Now, whether that affects the legal case, I don't know. But I think the fact that he did not reveal that, being as smart as he is, he's a smart guy. To me, is just very odd. He can remember the shrimp scampi and the appetizer. I don't remember. I ate yesterday.
Look at the first meeting. He and the president talk about the unreliability of that report. There was no need to go deeper than that. And be honest with you, Donald Trump talks a lot more in these memos than James Comey does. So there's nothing offensive or nefarious about it. Stick to the facts, because these memos are all about the facts.
So why did he want to leak
Comey put them down.
If they're embarrassing facts, why did he want to leak that?
To protect his reputation and to protect the United States of America. Absolutely.
United States of America?
Of course.
Okay.
Because his job is to protect the citizens. He doesn't work for Donald Trump.
But so you're admitting he considered Donald Trump an adversary?
It's clear he let it go. He let him go, and he wanted the special prosecutor to ensure the integrity of this investigation.
One of the great frustrations we've had for months now, you talk about protecting the United States of America. My heavens, the way you do that is you be honest with American citizens, and the Justice Department and FBI have obstructed at every turn, as we've requested. How many times have we had to threaten subpoena or subpoena?
Has Donald Trump been honest with the American people since he's been the president?
He's been more transparent on what's been going on in this investigation.
He has made more misleading statements and lies documented than any other president during the same period of time.
No collusion. Guys, we're out of time. We could do for a whole hour. And I love Scott Bolton.
And another thing.
Congressman. And there's so much more in the memos to get to. We're going to bring in Victor Davis Hanson and Ari Fleischer when we come back. And fascinating moments from Jim Comey's never-ending book tour. It's like...
All for state representative.
I love redacted things, the big black. Don't you love the big black? Don't you want to know what's behind that black? Probably really boring, but makes it look really official. Welcome back to the Ingraham Angle. We're continuing to cover the release of those Comey memos to the file. Why aren't powerful Trump bashers like Jim Comey being held to the same standards that Special Counsel Bob Mueller is applying to the president and his associates? For some answers, we go to Victor Davis Hanson, columnist and senior fellow at Stanford's Hoover Institute, Chris Hahn, former aide to Senator Chuck Schumer, and Ari Fleischer, press secretary to George W. Bush. Gentlemen, great to see all of you. Let's start with you, Ari, on this. Your takeaway thus far in the discussion of these memos. We've all had a chance to read through them. Your thoughts?
Well, I think there's really nothing new in here that we haven't heard before from James Comey, except for three things, Laura, that I looked through the memos. I've read them all now, and I saw. One is that the president told James Comey that he had serious reservations about National Security Advisor Mike Flynn's judgment. He said that very early about Mike Flynn. Two, he said that Eric Holder, the Attorney General under Obama, was smarter, more sophisticated, and smoother than Loretta Lynch, the other Attorney General under President Obama. And finally, he rebutted the notion in here. He said the White House is beautiful, compares favorably to Mar-a-Lago, rebutting those stories where President Trump said that the White House was a dump. Those are the only three things in here that I thought were new. We've heard it all before.
Well, I think the president made it clear that if there was anything to be investigated, it should be investigated. I mean, the fact that he wanted the the FBI director to actually announce or say that he wasn't a target, that's like a human reaction for someone who hasn't lived in Washington. I don't have any problem with that whatsoever. Chris, your thoughts?
Well, look, I don't have a problem with him wanting, things that were said about him investigated. I do have a problem with the loyalty thing. I think Jim Comey's probably going to have a problem with these things being released tonight because it's coming to his book sales. I mean, half the book's right in these memos that I just read for free. So I guess I don't have to buy the book, which I wasn't buying anyway, because quite frankly, I don't like the way he behaved in 2016 during the election. I think he put himself and his own positions above, and he inserted himself into politics in a way that no FBI director ever should.
Well, Scott Bolden, who was our previous guest, admitted that the reason Comey put those memos out to his pal at Columbia was that he was worried about his own reputation. The idea that this was some altruistic motive, Victor Davis Hanson, on the part of Jim Comey, like he was doing it for the nation. Come on. He was doing it because Trump canned him, and he didn't like that.
Well, he was leaking from a leaked memo. Remember, he went into the meeting intending to memorialize him, so he was careful. Trump had no idea that this conversation would ever get out. So Comey was sort of fixing this scene, and we were looking for two things in them, collusion and obstruction of justice. It's not there. What there is some very strange things that Ari mentioned, but also Trump has a cunning or prescient suspicion that McCabe is not trustworthy.
Right.
That proved to be true. But it's sort of, it's very funny because Robert Mueller has gone after obstruction, he's gone after lying to federal investigators, he's gone after leaking, he's gone after all of these supposed crimes with minor figures, but what he really did do inadvertently was he opened up a Pandora's box of equality under the law. So on the other track we had DOJ and FBI people who were all exposed to the allegations that Mueller is making against minor figures, predicated on the idea they thought Hillary Clinton was going to win the election and these would be swept under the rug. And now with the McCabe referral and these memos that don't really show much, the finger's out of the dike, and I think you're going to see a lot of exposure.
Chris?
I don't think you could call General Flynn or Paul Manafort minor figures in the Trump campaign. I think that's just wrong. And the accusations against them are pretty serious, and I think they should be taken serious. And I don't know necessarily, Laura, that this points directly to the president, but I do think that they did some bad things, particularly Manafort.
Yeah, let Victor respond. I got that point, Chris. Victor, your response.
I don't think you found any collusion, which was a mandate of the special counsel with either Manafort or Flynn, and I think you're going to find out that Flynn's confession was based on a text that was probably gained from a FISA court improperly, and the investigators who talked to him said that he probably did not contradict the surveilled text, and that you're going to see a change in that confession because it was a.
I don't want to get Manafort's not really the part of this memo released tonight, but we could talk about Manafort for a long time, and let's go to Ari on this. Ari, the more that you marinate in this stuff, the more you wonder how we got to this place. I mean, it really was, Victor is right. This was, the Russians were manipulating Trump, and Trump was, was doing all these deals in Russia, and so thus, Russia is going to be treated, gingerly and so nicely. Trump has been so tough on Russia. He's never going to be tough enough for the left, who suddenly are like really anti-Russian. When we really needed them in the 80s, they were like, Russia, Russia, Russia is great, but now Russia is the big bad evil thing. But there is no collusion. Oh, in the 80s, when I was talking about the Soviet Union as a student journalist, Chris, I had a lot of my friends at Dartmouth who were holding up signs saying, you know, Ronnie Reagan. You know, Ronnie Reagan's going to blow up the world. Let's do détente with the Soviet Union.
Laura, let me cut to.
Give me a break. I mean, I don't want to go back to college highlights, but the left was sympathizing with the Russians and the Soviets in the 80s. Now it's the Russia baiting morning, noon, and night. Ari, go ahead.
Laura, there's one bottom line. The bottom line is there's a large group of people in this country who have not accepted the results of an election. And as a result of that, they will support anything that makes Donald Trump look bad so they can hopefully throw him out of office. They've ginned it up now to the point where a special counsel has been named to investigate Donald Trump with no evidence that anybody knows of collusion. If collusion had taken place, we all know it would have leaked by now. We'd all know about it. We need to accept the results of the election and get this country back on track. That's what this gets down to. I hope Mueller wraps it up soon, announces there's no collusion. We'll see what happens to Manafort. We'll see what happens to Gates and the others. But as for the president and the future of this nation, he won. Let's get on with the government business.
Victor Davis Hanson, I'm going to get into... Chris, go ahead.
Yeah, I think the issue is equality. The real issue, excuse me, the issue is really equality under the law.
Yeah, Victor, we have to talk about...
The issue is equality under the law.
Yeah, whether people are going to be treated in a disparate fashion or the same, under the same or similar circumstances.
Yeah.
But I have to ask about McCabe. Yes. We had a criminal referral now on Andrew McCabe. How significant is that? Again, Trump's instinct about him, he has really good political instincts. His political instinct on McCabe was he was slippery. Go ahead.
Oh, he knew from the beginning, and because he has good instincts, as you say, but McCabe has four instances where he may have not told the truth, and his testimony will be in conflict with James Comey and maybe Loretta Lynch's, and we'll see if a DOJ attorney uses the same types of tactics that Mueller does and leverages one of those three people to for a larger story, because their testimonies are not compatible. And again, either lying to Congress or lying to a federal investigator or obstructing justice with a FISA court is legal or it's not legal. And Mr. Mueller has reminded us that those are things that cannot be legal. But what he didn't realize is that they apply far more forcefully to other people who have that exposure. And the American people are tired of it, and now I think we're seeing the result of that frustration.
All right, another fantastic segment, and thanks so much to all three of you. Now, how to stop the swamp, defeat the swamp's efforts to take down Trump's nominees. That's the focus of tonight's Angle. It has been 15 months since the Trump inauguration, and yet there are still more than 500 positions across the federal government that have yet to be filled by Trump appointees. These range from Assistant Secretary of State for Political Military Affairs to Assistant Secretary of Homeland Security for Policy. Now, from my own experience in both the Education Department, the Transportation Department, and also at the White House, it's at that Assistant Secretary or maybe Associate Deputy level, that's where all the work gets done. Well, the fault lies partly in the administration itself. Think about this. The Office of Presidential Personnel, it's really important. It runs the president's staffing, is now overburdened and understaffed. Obama's Office of Presidential Personnel had 3 times the staff of what Trump has. Now, it takes people, actual employees in that office, to process names, shepherd the vetting process, and do real follow-through on people who are suggested to various positions. Now, I realize that Trump wants to cut the size of government, but there are better places to cut than OPP. And, of course, most responsible for this travesty, though, of all these delays and all the foot-dragging are the Democrats. Stopping Trump from putting his own people in key positions, well, what does it do? Well, it's obvious. It slows down Trump's progress. 431 of President Trump's nominees have received Senate confirmation. That's a far lower number than any other president at this point in their terms. Now, Democrats have continuously invoked a rule that requires 30 hours of debate on many of Trump's appointees. So that means that nominees wait an average of 84 days for confirmation. That's a lot longer also than previous administrations. More than 50% of Trump's nominees for federal judgeships are still awaiting confirmation. Democrats' obstruction efforts are having a negative impact on the basic functions of our government. It causes inefficiencies, and it even can put our national security at risk. The Senate has yet to act on the nominations of several key diplomatic posts, most notably with Richard Grenell. The Harvard-educated diplomat is President Trump's nominee to be ambassador for Germany, and he's being held up by one Democrat senator, Jeff Merkley, of Oregon. Now, what could Mitch McConnell do to move things along as the Senate Majority Leader? Well, he could tell Chuck Schumer the following. Hey, Chuck, the Senate's not going to recess until you all start dispensing with this 30-hour rule and start allowing votes on key nominees. These guys want to get home on the weekends. You don't think they'll start picking up the pace? And if he needs to change or dispense with the filibuster rule, he may need to do that, too. You can't let this continue. Remember in 2013, then Senate Majority Leader Harry Reid blew up the filibuster rule for federal appointments in the executive branch, like cabinet officials, and the judicial branch. And this is how Obama was able to pack the lower courts as he did. Well, Trump could do the same here. Donald Trump's frankly been asking for that. But now some are looking to put another scalp on the wall, and I'm talking the Democrats. Who do they want? Mike Pompeo's scalp, Trump's CIA director, who has been nominated for Secretary of State. Now, during his confirmation hearing, America saw the Democrats' demonization game on full display. Auditioning for 2020 was New Jersey's Cory Booker.
Is being gay a perversion?
Senator, when I was a politician, I had a very clear view on whether it was appropriate for two same-sex persons to marry. I stand by that.
Do you believe that gay sex is a perversion? Yes or no?
Senator, if I can,
yes or no, sir. Do you believe that gay sex is a perversion?
Now, Democrats claim to be against discrimination, except when they're discriminating. So if you're someone who holds a traditional outlook, like any faithful Catholic, for instance, other Christians, should we now assume that you need not apply to any of these positions? Then there were swings and misses, like this one from Senator Jeanne Shaheen.
You were criticized at the CIA for undermining policies of the previous administration to improve diversity at the CIA.
I don't know the criticism that you're referring to. I have to tell you, I didn't undermine a single policy.
Well, I would just say Michael Weinstein, who is a former Air Force officer who founded the Military Religious Freedom Foundation, says that he has been seeing increasing complaints from those inside the intelligence community under your leadership.
The number of, we call them no-fear complaints, the statutory requirement, decreased from 2016 to 2017 by 40%.
Good.
I like the good. That's just pathetic. Come on. I mean, even Dianne Feinstein, who's usually more reasonable in these matters and voted to confirm Pompeo as CIA director just last year, she's announced that she's voting against him because he's too hawkish at a time when we need more diplomacy. Oh, okay, he only traveled to North Korea over Easter weekend, met with Kim Jong-un, and laid the groundwork for President Trump's upcoming negotiations with the communist regime. That's all. I mean, that is truly historic, and it could be a monumental move for peace. Oh, don't worry about that, Di-Fi. But the Democrats, let's face it, they don't care to let the facts get in the way. If the choice is supporting the anti-Trump resistance or supporting policies that deliver real results, the Democrats are going to choose the resistance every time. It is despicable. Now, consider some of the supposed reasons that some senators are now opposing Pompeo.
He has devalued religious tolerance and women's reproductive rights and health care, not only in this country, but around the world. I think he sets a poor example in terms of American values.
American values? Like, I don't know what you consider to be American, sir, but Mike Pompeo's life is a shining example of what sacrifice for nation is all about. First in his class at West Point, Harvard Law top of his class, popular congressman, stellar CIA director for the last year, who won the respect and trust of the President of the United States. 39 in the Democratic caucus are expected to vote no already on Pompeo, and 9 are undecided. This is the time to test the so-called moderate Senate Democrats from states that Trump won. Smartly, Heidi Heitkamp of North Dakota just came out today as the first Democrat to support Pompeo's nomination, but no word yet on Senators Joe Donnelly of Indiana, Joe Manchin of West Virginia, and Claire McCaskill of Missouri. When those guys are out campaigning for re-election, as they are now, they're always claiming that, oh, I'm open to working with the president on issues where, you know, it's important for the American public. Well, let me talk to them here. Pompeo's nomination is a key issue for America. And those senators know, as well as I do, that he's more than a reasonable choice for Secretary of State. He is an excellent choice. And each of these senators should be called out and pressured to break with their leftist radical colleagues for the good of the nation. And if they don't vote for Pompeo, they are no more moderate than Cory Booker or Elizabeth Warren. And that's the angle. When we come back, the fired Starbucks manager who called the cops on 2 black men is being...
Ask your doctor about Victoza.
The 2 gentlemen at the center of the Starbucks racial controversy told their story on network TV this morning. They suggested that they were racially profiled when they failed to buy anything at the store and then refused to leave. The men were eventually arrested. So why isn't Starbucks, which is sympathetic to their story, releasing surveillance video from the store to back up their account? And should the employee fired for calling the police sue Starbucks for defamation of character, since she's now basically being tarred as a racist? Let's bring in 2 lawyers. It's a fun debate to take both sides of the issue. Attorney David Wall in Los Angeles believes that employee definitely could have a case, and attorney David DiPietro in Fort Lauderdale disagrees. Let's go to David D. I love having 2 Davids on. Let's go to David D. Why is this a difficult defamation claim to make?
It's a very difficult defamation claim. It's all fun and games until the police show up. And then, unfortunately, under this circumstance, it was no longer fun and games. The reason why there is no defamation is Starbucks has done, presumably that's who she would sue for defamation, this manager, and they haven't said anything about her. They're actually in damage control and trying to save the reputation of their brand to such an extent that they're going to close 8,000 of their stores on Sunday, May 29th.
Yeah, right. But David, that doesn't go to the defamation. Okay, we have to keep the conversation really focused because closing of the stores, as fascinating as that training I'm sure is going to be, is not relevant to the defamation claims. Let's try to keep it really focused. You said they didn't say anything about her. This is what Howard Schultz said yesterday about the manager. Let's watch.
And I think you have to say, and looking at the tape, that she demonstrated her own level of unconscious bias. And in looking at the tape, you ask yourself whether or not that, in fact, was racial profiling. There's no doubt in my mind that the reason that they were called was because they were African American.
All right, David W. obviously did make a comment. Unless she had a pattern in practice of racist comments, racist activity, racially profiling people, being rude to disparately to whites, to blacks, to Latino, I'd take the case. I'd take the case any day. Go ahead.
Yeah. Howard Schultz, get out your checkbook, because what this manager did was follow company policy to a T as spelled by their PIO, their spokesperson. When a non-customer comes in and uses the facilities, as these 2 men did, the bathroom, they are to be asked to leave. If they do not cooperate and they do not leave, law enforcement is to be contacted. That's exactly what she did. Law enforcement came. They asked these men to leave 3 times before they arrested those 2 men for trespass. This woman now has been tarred and feathered as a racist by Howard Schultz with no evidence that race had anything to do with it. She was fired, and you're correct. She has a great defamation lawsuit and a wrongful termination lawsuit. And worse than that, Laura, What message is Starbucks sent now to employees? That if you suspect something's going down or going wrong, you better not call 911 or else you'll be tarred and feathered as a racist and you'll be fired. It's a horrible mess, but that woman, I'll tell you what, I'd take her lawsuit in a heartbeat.
Yeah, I was like, see something, don't say something. It's just like, here's what Dante Robinson said on Good Morning America. He was one of the gentlemen who was at the Starbucks. Let's watch.
What do you say to some people who say rules are rules, that Starbucks has a policy, you violated that policy, the police asked you repeatedly to leave and you didn't? How do you respond to people who say that?
What I say is I understand that. Rules are rules, but what's right is right and what's wrong is wrong. And that's in any situation, whether it's race involved, anything.
I'm not following the right is right, wrong is wrong, rules are rules. Yeah, I mean, Starbucks does have this policy, David DiPietro. And now, what does an employee at Starbucks do? I mean, you are in a difficult position, right? If you think the policy is you have to buy something, otherwise we can all just use Starbucks as our offices, I guess, and just be tech campers, sit there all day on our laptops. But it is a business, and they do have seats for paying customers. Is that now not allowed, or we can't enforce that rule because everyone's going to be afraid to do anything, I think, at this point?
Well, that's the culture that Starbucks has created. How many of us have met people at Starbucks for business reasons and maybe not ordered something? So I think Starbucks has sort of set this culture out there.
You don't have a right to go and use.
I mean,
you try to go over to Cafe Milano here. Let's take another example. Cafe Milano in D.C. Bring a brown bag lunch. And you meet at lunch and you say, well, no, I don't want anything. I'm meeting someone here. He'll be here any moment. You just sit out and like put out your bologna sandwich and you get your little, milk and you sit there like, oh, no, I'm okay. I don't need anything. How long before you get thrown out of Milano?
Yeah, but what about a little diplomacy? Think about this. Did they need to be arrested? In order to be arrested, somebody has to say, the owner or the agent of the owner, I want them arrested. They could have just had them kicked out. Next time, just have them.
Well, they asked them to leave and they wouldn't leave, right?
But still, somebody has to say, arrest them. If the owner has said, no, I just want them out, that's a much different scenario.
Laura, these men were cursing at the manager. They weren't just being quiet and shrugging their shoulders. They were cursing. But let's face this. Everything Starbucks does is put through a filter of political correctness first. Starbucks does not want picketing. They don't want protesting. They don't want the social justice warriors claiming it's a racist organization. They don't want any of that. So what they've done is they've thrown that manager under the bus, trashed her reputation, ruined her life, all in the interest of maintaining their corporate brand. And she's got a huge lawsuit, and I guarantee you that's going to be filed. And hey, God bless the lawyer that takes it, because he's going to be a rich man.
She might have signed a release. I bet you guys are we're all attorneys. I bet Starbucks, if I had to guess, don't you think they wrote her a check, made her sign a release, and said bye-bye? They got some smart lawyers at Starbucks.
Well,
but just like Stormy Daniels, you can void the non-disclosure. You can void it. They think they can do it with Stormy. Maybe they can do it here. All right, guys, we're out of time.
I don't think the jury in Philadelphia is going to give her anything.
Lieutenant Governor Mary Taylor, a phony conservative you just can't trust.
A shocking development to bring you tonight in the immigration debate. The Department of Homeland Security says that at least 142 suspected gang members were put on our streets last year because of Sanctuary City's catch and release policies. Unbelievable. Now, that flies in the face of what Democrats have repeatedly insisted is their real, true intent.
Let me be clear. Anybody in this country who's undocumented, who has committed serious crimes, they need to be deported.
And I am not defending any criminals. I think that would be ludicrous, and it doesn't make absolutely any sense.
I believe that there needs to be serious, severe, and swift consequence when people commit serious and violent crimes. And certainly, if they are undocumented, they should be deported if they commit those serious and violent offenses.
Now, let's get the real story. National Border Patrol Council President Brandon Judd joins us from Skype in Montana, and his group spokesman, Border Patrol agent Hector Garza, is in San Antonio. Gentlemen, I knew it was bad. I didn't know it was this bad. But now we have the numbers, and the numbers do not lie. Brandon, let's start with you. Are you thinking at this point the Democrats are going to start eating crow after all these comments that, oh, we're not in favor of that? That's not what sanctuary city policies actually do. That's not what they accomplish. Every night I hear something like that on this show.
No, Laura.